the floor is yours.
All right, so here's me with the second seminar, because I couldn't pick which one I wanted to do most. So here's clothing repairs for dummies. What are my qualifications for this? Well, it's not my day job, as you already know, that was the security thing. But I have sewn for a while, and I take classes and things, and I'm one exam away from being a certified seamstress or something. So I guess I have some credentials. I do have, like, I'm in my sewing room, and here's my machine and some other sewing doodads, but I'm not going to use any of them because I want this to be inclusive and easy for people to do themselves, because that's kind of the point of doing the seminar. So I will be using this little sewing kit that I bought at my local supermarket. I think it cost about $3.50, and it's similar to the ones you might find in your hotel room in some drawer somewhere. You know, like one of these. This has even less stuff, but I think I'm only going to use the stuff that you could also find in one of these, even though this has a few more things in it. So I'm just going to open it up and see whether it's any good. But in theory, you should be able to get this very easily and start doing your own repairs. Make sense? Yes, it's not an unboxing video. So that was sort of step one. No fancy equipment, just this sewing kit that I bought at my supermarket. Second is I'm going to mention some specific stitches, and they're going to have names, technical sewing names or whatever, but don't sweat it if you don't remember the actual names or even the actual stitches, because the main principle of I have a piece of thread, I want it to tie some fabric together, and I'm going to do so using a needle is universal. And if you do something like that, that works. I don't really care. So I'm going to start by showing you how to attach a button. I'm also going to show you how to fix a rip in the fabric and how to invisibly stitch an open seam like on a coat or something. And then if we have some time, we might do some overcasting, but we'll see how it goes time-wise. So buttons are very common in that they fall off a lot, especially because they're not attached that well usually by machine when you buy clothes in stores. So I think everyone has had a button fall off of a jacket or a shirt or some pants at some point, and they're really not hard to put back on. So I just have some scrap fabric here that we're going to attach the button to. And normally you would pick a color of thread that matches either the rest of the buttons or the fabric or the button. I'm going to pick something that's quite a contrast with the button so that you can actually tell what I'm doing. So let's see, here we have 2 needles that we're going to need. And it looks like I've also got 2 pins that I don't think I'm going to need. And let's go for the black thread. Let's see if we can get that loose. So the amount of thread you need is, for a button, usually not much, but you want to get a little bit extra just because working with a very short bit of thread is quite annoying. So I'm going to take a length, something like, I don't know, on the small cam, this much is how much I got. And I think that's about enough to put a button on. Now, you'll notice that in the package we have some scissors, and I suspect that what we're going to do with them is throw them in the trash, because these cheapo scissors from cheapo sewing sets, yeah, this is not even sharpened. I'm going to try cutting the thread with them, but I think this is not going to go well. Yeah, no. Fortunately, you don't need to keep these. They just go out of the window like that. And what you probably have in your pocket, even if you're at a magic fest or whatever trying to repair your pants that you just ripped out of, is your keys. So this is a key, and security speaking, keys can be duplicated from pictures, which is why I'm missing a key for a bike that I no longer own. Good luck. So you just take your key and you just put some pressure on the thread and you go like boop, and that's how you cut a thread. Then we're going to put it into the needle. Now, I noticed that our little sewing kit has one of these needle threaders. If you've ever wondered what the heck this is, it's to thread the needle. There's a little flappy thing here at the top that goes through the eye of the needle, like, see if I can get this right. And because it's kind of stiff, it should be easier to do than getting the actual thread through. But honestly, this one, it's not great. Maybe if you squeeze it a little bit or something. Already, this kit is proving to be its money's worth. Yeah, no. So we're gonna throw this out as well. And you just take the end of your thread, and usually people stick it in their mouth. If you think that's disgusting, I guess you can wet your fingers and then sort of rub the thread. But you just want to make sure that there's no little pieces of lint or whatever getting in the way of just poking that through. Now, let's see if I can actually do this without holding it up to my face. And that's it. Whoop! No, it fell out! Oh my god. The tension, the suspense. Alright, attempt number 2. Gotcha. Alright. Yeah, I threaded it. Alright. And then for buttons, I like to actually double my thread over. So I'm just gonna make the ends of the thread match up so that I've got a double thread. It's because more thread is more better when it comes to buttons. So it takes less effort if you double it up. Then you're gonna need to tie a knot at the end. And that's where most people are like, how do you do the little knot at the end thing? There are several ways. By far the easiest is you put the end between your fingers, wrap it around your index finger once, make sure there's a little bit of overlap underneath your thumb, and then you just roll it off your finger, trying to mess it up as much as you can, and then you slide it to the end, and you have a knot. Magical. If you didn't catch that, I'm going to do it again later. So not that hard. So now we have a piece of thread with a knot at the end. And the knot is not that pretty, so you're going to want to hide that. And there are several places you can hide it. One is on the inside of the fabric. Let's assume that this is the outside. You can just start from the back, and it won't be visible from the front, but it will still be visible on the back. So the even more optimal way is that you start from the top, actually, so like from the outside, because in the end, the button is going to sit over the top of that, and it's going to hide the knot that you made. Oh my god, right? So, stick it through, stick it back up. And this is not a manicure seminar, but I guess I can talk pointers later or something like that. But yeah, I do style my nails into this shape. They don't grow like that. That would be weird. Anyway, usually buttons have 2 or 4 holes. It doesn't really matter which one you go up through first. But after that, I guess you're going to do them in pairs. So we're going to do these 2 holes on the left first, and then we're going to do the 2 on the right. So just poke through, and you might want to check whether it sort of aligns with your previous stitch, because it's going to look neater on the inside. So do a little check, but don't sweat it too much. Just go through there a couple of times. Make sure you do end up coming out of the correct hole in the button, because I think this is the wrong one. Whoop. And after you make a couple of stitches, you can move on to the other pair of holes. I would recommend doing a bit more than I did here, but since time is a thing, I'm just going to move on to the second set of holes. I have to do some poking to find it. You just make a couple of stitches through every pair of holes. to make sure that it's securely attached. And honestly, the easiest way to find it again is to just poke around until you find it. Up a little bit. There. And so when you're done, you're going to want to finish it in a knot at the end, because otherwise this is just going to come out. What? My nails are not acrylic. My nails are just real nails. Anyway, to tie a knot on the back, what you want to do is stitch through the threads that are already there that you use to attach the button. So let's see if I can get this cleanly. So you go under the thread that's already there, and then you take the thread not coming out of the back of the needle, but coming out of the fabric, and you just wrap it around the tip of the needle twice before pulling it through. And that's effectively going to tie a knot in the thread. And you might want to do it twice to make sure it's super secure. And then maybe if you cut it now at some length, there's also going to be this thread dangling out of the back. So to make it to make this also invisible, you're just going to poke it back to the front and not out of the button, but come out underneath the button like this. Whoop. And then you can cut it once again with your keys, because the tiny scissors from the kit are garbage. Just put a little bit of pressure on it. And rip it off. And now you can put your judge pants back on because the button is securely attached. Ta-da! So now let's assume that your judge pants have a rip in them. Like, oh no, a rip happened in my shirt. I'm gonna just take a different color for this because I don't have enough left on my needle to do this one. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and grab one that I prepared earlier. And for this, we're not gonna use a double thread, we're just gonna use a single. So once again, I'm gonna tie a knot in the end, wrap it around your finger once, double it over underneath your thumb, and just, that didn't feel right, roll it off until it makes a big tangle like that, and slide it to the end. Ta-da! Now, assuming that this is the outside of my pants, and this is the inside of my pants, I'm going to want to do the stitching on the inside of the pants. So you're going to turn them inside out, which I'm doing right now. So here we can also see the inside of the button, and you're just going to line up the edges of the rip. So the rip stops right about here, and this is the part that we're going to want to stitch together again. And what I'm going to show you is what's called a back stitch. And it's called the back stitch because you go sort of one step forward, 2 steps back, which is going to make it a really sort of strong and secure stitch. And it starts with just a simple... You're going to want to do this a little bit off the edge of the fabric so it doesn't rip out of the sides or anything. So you just start with a small stitch. And then instead of just going forward and sticking the needle in like this, you're going to actually go back to where your stitch started. I think it's a bit blurry but still visible on camera. And then you're going to come out of the fabric 1 stitch length away from there. So my original stitch went to here, and then I went back to where I started, skipped past the stitch that I already did, and came out 1 stitch length further than that. So then you end up with, on the if it doesn't get tangled up, you end up with this stitch on the front and a longer stitch on the back. And that's how they are going to overlap, because now we're going to start, once again, we go back to where the previous stitch stopped, skip over a little ways. So once again, the thread is coming out here in the middle, and the needle is going a little bit back and a little bit in front of it. I'm glad to see that everyone's grandmas at least taught people this. So then you just keep going like that, going a little bit back and a little bit forward for every stitch. And you want to try to keep this in as straight a line as you can, because all the stitches that are sort of out of line are going to kind of show on the final product. Also, I'm using a dark thread here on white fabric, which is not usually optimal. You want to pick a color that is as close as possible to the color of your fabric so it doesn't show as much. But obviously, I want to show you what I'm doing, so that's why I'm using a different color. What is happening in the chat? This paper cutter incident that you mentioned, Jurgen, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Me neither. Never happened.
So mine is not super tidy, but we'll get there in the end. So what's going to happen on the back is that you're going to have multiple overlapping stitches, and that is partially what makes the strength. And it's also what's going to make it not wrinkle up when you pull on the thread. Maybe I should have made a shorter rip so the demo would be faster. What? Why is it tangled up now? I think I screwed something up somewhere. So good lesson. When you screw something up somewhere, which I think I caught the thread into some of the back stitching at some point, you can just take it off of the needle and remove any offending stitches. So now we're back to a pretty normal state. Oops. I'm just going to rethread the needle. In one try this time. Haha! Can she thread it? Yes, she can! Alright, so we're going to need to come out somewhere over here. That's bad. Somewhere there. So we're nearly at the end, and you want to not stop exactly at the end of the rip. You want to go a little bit past it, because the edges of the fabric might fray, and you don't want them to sort of pop out of the part that you fixed. So from when you reach the end of the rip with your parallel stitch, you're just going to sort of make a diagonal towards the edge of the fabric. There's probably some multi-threading jokes here, but eh. And when you reach the end of the fabric, once again, we're going to tie a knot the way we did on the button. So you just make a small stitch, leave the needle halfway through, and wrap the end of the thread that's sticking out of the fabric around it twice, and then you pull it through. And I usually do 2 of those just to make sure. And there you go. Now, of course, you're all dying to know what it looks like. I'm sure the tension is high. So this is what your fixed rip is going to look like on the right side of the fabric. It shows a little bit here, the black thread, because obviously the color match is not great. And here you can see that where my stitches were not perfect, it's a little bit more obvious than where they were in a nice straight line. But if you do this in a matching color, obviously you can still see the line because there's no way around that. You cannot magically weave the fabric back together, but it's pretty stealthy. I think we're so far so good. Or are any people already lost? I think we're good. People are typing. Yeah, I guess some people could magically weave the fabric back together. But so this is where we have an actual rip in the fabric, like the fabric itself, the fibers in the fabric got damaged. But there are also some cases where you just had a seam, like this one, and oh no, a hole appeared in the seam. And maybe you're lucky and it's in a seam that you can actually access. Like if you turn it inside out, here you have the fabric where it comes together, and you can just take this part and fold it flat, and you can just do your back stitch along here the same way that I just did on the rip and put it back together. But sometimes you won't be able to do that. For example, if you have a jacket that has a lining and either just the lining or just the outside of the jacket got opened up like this, then you have no way of accessing the back of the fabric. So there's a special stitch for that called a ladder stitch that I just want to show you. Where did I put my needle with my thread? It went somewhere. Luckily, I have spares. So once again, it starts with a knot because it always does. Just once again, wrap it around your finger, roll it off, and pull the ends. Sometimes it looks a bit messy like that. It doesn't matter because we're going to put it somewhere where the sun don't shine, and I don't mean where you're thinking. Because where we're going to put it, or maybe you were thinking this. So here we have the rip, and you do have some access to the inside because it's currently open. So you're going to want to start by sort of navigating your needle in there somewhere and just picking up a little bit of the fabric inside the rip so that the sorry, I didn't want to read your minds. So you just pick up a little bit of the fabric on the inside that you can access through the rip, because then the knot will be hidden in there. And actually, I just started this from the bottom, so I'm just going to flip this over because it's easier to do it that way. And then what you're going to do is I've currently got the thread coming out of the right edge of the fabric. I'm going to go straight across the gap and into the other edge of the fabric. So this is a folded edge. It's not a raw edge. So you can actually just poke the needle straight into it. It takes a bit of fiddling, but you can get it actually to go straight into that edge. And then you can get it back out again a couple of millimeters further over. So if I can, of course on camera it never goes the way you want. So let's get the focus kind of right. So here you can see that the needle is going into the fabric right there, and it's coming out again over there, and it's just going through the edge of the fabric. And then you're going to go straight across from where now the thread is coming out and into the edge of the fabric again on the right side. And do the same thing. Righto. It's a bit of a wiggle wiggle. You can learn this, it's not that hard. I'm just going to do 2 more of these stitches. So once again, you go straight across and into the edge of the fabric. And I'm going to show you now why it's called a ladder stitch. It's because when you sort of open it up like this, you can see that the threads together with the side of the fabric kind of make a ladder shape, right? You have the two sides of the rip, and then you have the threads going across. And that's okay. They can stay a bit wiggly like this while you're stitching because they're very easy to tighten up afterwards. So you just keep going, wiggling your way up. Every time going straight across the gap, picking up a little bit of the edge, and then coming out again. How much time do I have left? I got 3 minutes? All right, I think I can finish this in 3 minutes. So when you're fixing something, you might also want to go a little bit past the end of where the seam sort of fell apart, so that the loose ends of the seam that ripped aren't going to come loose on you. So when you reach the part that still seems to be attached together, just do 1 or 2 more stitches. And now, so you can see that there's still a bit of a gap with the threads going across, but when you pull it, it just closes itself up and it looks super invisible. Even with the sort of mismatched threads, it doesn't look that obvious that it was fixed. And now obviously you can't tie a knot on the back because you can't reach it, theoretically, in this scenario. So I'm just going to make a couple of stitches right through the center of the seam, because there also it's not going to be that obvious that something happened. It's just going to sort of get into that dimple. Tie a knot. And then if you don't want to have the thread, when you cut it off, it's going to be sort of poking out of the surface of the fabric, which maybe you don't want. So what you can do is stitch into the fabric right on top of your knot, and then come out of the fabric again a little ways over, like over here. You just pull that through. And then we're going to scrunch up the fabric a little bit where the thread is coming out to make the thread shorter. And then when you cut it, sorry, I'm cheating with my scissors. Where are my keys? And then when you cut the thread and you flatten the fabric out, the thread just pulls into the fabric and you won't be able to tell that it's there. This is just a bit of thread from the original stitching that I guess is bothering me now. So I guess that's how you fix your judge pants or your judge shirt if you get caught in trouble on a GP floor or any other event. All you need is a needle and some crappy thread. Throw out the scissors, throw out the needle threaders. Just need your keys. And we're off to the next seminar. I'll see you later, I guess.
All right, thank you, Anniek. And yes, the next